Minister President, Mr. Kerner, Mr. Marx, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you most cordially for being invited, because it is an honor to me and also gives me great pleasure to give you the economist's point of view here. And I'm also personally happy to be back in Frankfurt because I did my PhD thesis not far from here. I lived in Frankfurt for 8 years, so I've been able to follow the change taking place in the city, from a city that felt unsecure to a city that feels pretty safe now. This 20th German Congress on Crime Prevention is taking on a new and maybe unusual perspective with the topic chosen. But I think, given the development of this Congress over its 20-year history, is not really surprising. In the 1990s, it was about providing information and sensitization about crime prevention by exchanging information, which was very much at the focus of attention. And then around the turn of the century, and since then, it was more content-related question to do with the overall societal crime prevention. Apart from these changing focus on context and content, very early on, the systematic provision of information was attached great importance to, and already the Düsseldorf opinion or report gave some thought to the research into the causes and efficacy of crime prevention, and that is also the root of the selection of the 2015 topic, the economics of crime prevention. And that is in particular looking at the revenue or the returns of crime prevention, while at the same time taking into account its costs. That is to make a contribution to understanding, but also providing a reason for prevention. At the same time, of course, it's not isolated from the experience and findings of those who work on prevention in manifold ways and in direct and indirect ways, but rather it is to be a valuable supplement to it. But why the economics of crime prevention? Why look at the economic characteristics? First of all, crime leads to considerable damage to the national economy. For example, the losses incurred by victims of crime, public and private spending on prevention, and also public spending on police, justice system, probation officers, and the correction systems. Therefore, it is also a traditional matter important to national economics, because what national economics do is make sure that the scarce resources are used in the best efficient way. But what does it mean in practical application? In 2013, according to the German crime statistics, almost 2 million thefts, 7,000 cases of acts against sexual self-determination, and a high number of murder and manslaughter. The question is, what is the damage that this causes to our society? The damage by homicides, is that larger than the damage incurred through theft cases? What should the state spend on curbing crime? Does investment into early childhood education have a better effect on crime prevention than investment into the justice system and the penalty system? Should you therefore rather use more financial penalties instead of prison sentences? All of this can only be taken into account if all aspects are being confronted and contrasted in a comprehensive and holistic approach. And that is exactly what the cost-benefit analyses developed in economics are an excellent tool for. But what's decisive is the answering the question whether a project or program is effective in the first place. And that takes me back to the Düsseldorf explanation, because that is to investigate the effect of a program compared to the effect that would have incurred without it. So the causal effect of any program is to be determined. So without knowing about the success of a program, you cannot make any reliable statement about the effect of cost and benefit. Moreover, the estimation and allocation of monetary features for the revenue, the benefit of prevention are necessary, and that's the most difficult step of any cost-benefit analysis. Cost and benefit in this case are in an inverse relationship to each other. The cost of crime is in direct relation to the benefit to society, which lies in preventing or reducing crime. Therefore, in order to properly allocate the benefit, we need to identify those who bear the cost of crime. And that, apart from the victims, is also the relatives, the society, third parties, but also the offenders, who then go on to lead a different life than they would have if they hadn't become offenders. Moreover, different types of cost have to be taken into account. Crime not just causes material damage, but often also considerable immaterial or intangible damage. Material cost, that is, cost for medical services, police, penalty system, but also wages that couldn't be earned. And even if that seems to be easy to detect and measure, nevertheless, reliable data on such material cost is not provided in a standardized way or is not monitored at all. The intangible cost, in other words, the psychological suffering, pain, loss of quality of life, have a far stronger effect, but also vary a lot more strongly between individuals than the material cost. And also, this kind of effect is also felt by not just the victims themselves, but also the environment and society. And for that kind of cost, the emotional and psychological cost is not easy to determine. There are no market prices for it. But over the last few years, and especially the researcher Mark Cohen and his group at Wendell University, have developed a great many approaches that make it possible to take this cost factor also into account and thus result in some kind of overall cost of crime. Because only gathering material and intangible cost of crime make it possible to determine the relative damage incurred by the type of crime or offense. And that is also very often the interest of political decision makers. They want to have a comparison of damage. They want to know whether theft offenses or physical harm offenses lead to the higher amount of damage. An objective comparison, given the large number and frequency of offenses or the damage related to them, is not possible, however, although unfortunately, a comparison is still made very often. And also, by determining the material and intangible cost, mean that the overall damage of crime can be compared to other social misfortunes or misbalances. Comparing crime damage, for example, to the damage incurred through smoking, environmental pollution, or joblessness might not have a direct political implication. However, determining the financial cost and revenue for society compared to the financial cost and benefit of other societal responsibilities, however, makes it possible to make sure that crime, or rather its prevention and avoidance, can be adequately taken into account in establishing political priorities and raising awareness for the economic relevance of crime prevention. At the end of the day, determining all of the material and intangible cost and benefit also are the precondition in order to come up with a cost-benefit analysis in the first place. And also in prevention and crime policy, they can be used as support for decision-making. So there is a large number of prevention or crime-reducing measures which would profit from public support and public promotion. However, the state or the body in charge always have limited funds and therefore can only promote a limited number. And assessing it in monetary terms, therefore, can be an efficient approach for efficient crime policy and crime prevention. Cost-benefit analyses are used to assess public intervention and programs, especially in the Anglo-Saxon world, and that's been the case for many decades. An outstanding example are the analyses for the high school para-preschool program in Michigan. The results made it impressively clear that also activities and intervention primarily targeted at participation in education or avoiding unfortunate living conditions in childhood or early childhood can still lead to a considerable preventive effect when it comes to becoming offenders in later life or crime in general. When it comes to prevention and crime policy, especially the Washington State Institute for Public Policy from Olympia has to be mentioned. This institute, since 1997, has been investigating the efficacy and efficiency of prevention and penal system programs that follow the objective of coming up with efficient and effective programs for crime prevention and reduction. And also the Washington State Institute looked at interventions and showed that those intervention programs for children and young adults have turned out to be particularly efficient and also economically effective. The high benefit of such programs, I think, make it clear that crime policy and prevention activities shouldn't be too strict or too much covered by individual disciplines only. Other connected interventions can have a large and major economic benefit as well. In contrast to the efforts made in North America, comparable analyses and also the base of a true evaluation culture, that is the systematic and quite natural carrying out of cost-benefit analysis, is something that hardly exists in Germany. So I believe strengthening the interdisciplinary discourse and discussion in order to broaden the basis of information, the constructive critical have to be preferred to the constructive critical assessment. And all this has to be seen in context with other political fields of actions when looking at the most efficient use of resources. Moreover, an evaluation culture in the field of prevention and crime policy ought to be established, which defines the methodological requirements when designing interventions and projects. And finally, and I'm very much convinced of this, there should always be an overdisciplinary scientific discourse about the results obtained in order to avoid any claim for the disciplinary sovereignty of interpretation. This allows the evaluation of the empirical fact, taking into account the efficiency and efficacy mechanisms, relevant project governance, and alternative possibilities for action. From my point of view, therefore, this 20th German Congress on Crime Prevention offers the ideal preconditions to work towards just this. I look forward to an interesting Congress and an intensive dialogue with you. Thank you very much.